In Russia, you understand that actually government doesn't care about you almost, and not caring about you is like the best that government can do. So actually, and you get this opinion that, okay, if I move to another country and no one would care about me, it will be fine. But actually, it's not quite like this, because all of the countries have very, very strange bureaucracy about all the work permissions and all the other stuff. When you're not a citizen of a country, you actually enter some kind of prejunctions of not innocence.
Welcome to Deep Dive with me, Sean C. Fettig. According to the 2022 Freedom in the World report issued by Freedom House, 38% of the global population live in not free countries, and only 20% live in free countries. In 2022 alone, 60 countries experienced declines in democratic freedom, while only 25 experienced increases. This picture is stark. Democracies are in decline, and authoritarianism is on the rise. Increasingly, especially on the right, this trend is leveraged to suggest that authoritarian regimes are a legitimate alternative to democracy, that the rise of authoritarianism reflects the desire and need for something other than democracy, some counterbalance. But this argument misses something fundamental. We need to consider something else in tandem with this trend, the rise of authoritarianism, to help us more fully draw conclusions and make assumptions. Perhaps it's important to know how people living in these countries feel about increasing unfreedom. So here's something to consider. The world is also awash in refugees and immigrants, almost universally fleeing authoritarian, theocratic, and totalitarian regimes. And they are landing in democracies. They are fleeing to freedom. This undercuts the legitimacy of authoritarianism as a viable alternative to democracy. People don't want to live in authoritarian states. They don't want to live without voice, without freedom, and without safety. So this is a different picture, a reality that the number of democracies is declining while the number of authoritarian states is increasing, which has led to a massive influx of people fleeing these unfree states into increasingly shrinking available free states. This is a crisis, not of democracy. It's a crisis of authoritarianism. So the next two episodes, today and next week, take a closer look at people that are fleeing two of these authoritarian regimes. Next week, I'm talking to someone who fled political persecution in Venezuela for a better life in the United States, only to arrive and be placed on a bus commissioned by the Texas governor with no knowledge of where he was going and what would happen when he got there. And today, I'm talking to someone who has fled Russia. He refused to be mobilized to fight in support of Putin's war in Ukraine. We talk about his life in Russia before the war, how and why he decided to leave his homeland, how it's disrupted his life, and what he hopes for his future, having lost everything he had planned for himself and his family. In an effort to safeguard his privacy and his safety, I am calling him Sergei, though that is not his name. If you like this episode or any episode, please feel free to give it a like on your favorite podcast platform and/or subscribe to the podcast on YouTube. And as always, if you have any thoughts, questions, or comments, please feel free to email me at deepdivewithsean@gmail.com. Let's do a deep dive. Sergei, thanks for being here. How are you?
I'm great, thank you.
In pursuit of maybe understanding your present circumstances, I'm wondering if we could start with some of your personal history. So could you tell me where you grew up and what your childhood was like?
Actually, I changed some places in Russia and even outside. So my history is that when I was 6 months old, my family, I was born in Maykop. It's a city in Adygea, the south of Russia. Mm-hmm. Me and my family went to Sakhalin, which is an island at the east of Russia. And when I was 18 months old, we moved to Vietnam. Mm. My father worked in oil industry, and there was like oil company in Vietnam. it was Soviet and Vietnam at the same time. It was actually a time when Soviet Union stops to exist.
So like 1991?
Yeah, I was born in 89. We stayed there, I guess, until the 99, I guess. So if you talk about childhood, then it was actually in Russian district in Vietnam. And after that, we moved to Russia, to Moscow. But of course, I went to Russia almost every year to my grandparents, who were in Maykop and Slabinsk. It's both in Kraснодарский Krai. Actually, I'm originated from south of Russia and went there a lot. But in Russia, I actually lived in Moscow for the most of my life so far.
So you moved to Moscow right around the time you were becoming a teenager, yeah?
Yeah, I was 10 years old. My life changed a lot, but when you're a kid, your life is changing constantly. So you go to school and your life completely changes. Then, 3 years passed. I passed third grade and I went to Moscow. Life changed again. So it was actually when I went to Russia, while I was living in Vietnam and went to Russia, it always was during the summer. So actually, when I was 10 years old, it was first time I see the snow and remember it. Of course, theoretically, I saw the snow when I was 6 months or 1 year old, but I don't remember it. So for me, it was one of the shocking things. I actually see the snow, which is pretty much nonsense almost to the Russians. But for me, it was really an interesting experience as a kid.
Did you go to university in Moscow?
Yeah, I went to Moscow State University, Faculty of Physics, which I graduated in, it was winter 2010-2011. And after that, I worked a little bit on my PhD and started to work as analyst. I worked as analyst since then for all the time I was in Russia.
And then you decided to leave Russia, yeah?
I decided to leave after the war started. So I don't have real plans of leaving or something like this before the war. But for example, I had a lot of opportunities because my sister actually lives in United States with her husband and children, and her husband is Mexican. So that is one of the reasons, and maybe I guess the main reason why I choose Mexico as a country to relocate now, because there are some relatives on the side of my sister's husband who lives here. It was easier to, for example, find an apartment and stuff like this when you have some friends and relatives here.
So you weren't leaving Russia without doing any planning. You were able to decide where you were going to go and plan for that.
Yeah, I have pretty much time because when the war started, I actually wanted to leave Russia immediately, but I didn't have what we call foreign passport in Russia because we have inner passport. And to leave country, you need an additional foreign passport. And I have none. And it took about a month, I guess, to make one. During this month, the first impressions and uncertainty and everything that happens, it became a little bit less surprising. And during this month, I understood that, okay, maybe before something bad happens in Russia and I will not be able to leave Russia or I'll be mobilized or everything, that I actually have some time to prepare my relocation. So because it was delayed for the first month, I understood that, okay, things stopped changing that rapidly as it was in the first days, because the first days was every single day was different than the previous one. All the expectations shifted every day.
This is true of Ukrainians as well, in a different way, of course, that your lives changed dramatically overnight. I think for anyone not living in Ukraine or Russia when this happened, it's hard to grasp what that looked like, what it felt like. Maybe it's a bit easier to see on the Ukrainian side because there's more media and Western attention inside the Ukrainian borders. Whereas in Russia, media is being constrained and the government is stifling what information gets out, if it gets out, and how it gets out, etc. And I'm not talking about the politics of it all. I'm really wondering what was changing for everyday Russians like yourself inside Russia at this time.
I guess the main factor that appeared was like super uncertainty, because everyone knew that, okay, something bad is happening. Russian forces like invading Ukraine and it will affect us. Everyone knew that it will affect us because of the sanctions, because we know that like in Russia, everyone have an experience that if something like this happens, then, for example, all your money, especially in rubles, can stop costing, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So you enter some kind of panic mode when you try to, I don't know, move your savings to dollars and outside the Russia, try to actually understand what will happen with your job. Try to understand, for example, would Russia close the borders? Because, of course, if you start a war, then you would probably need people for mobilization. And actually closing the borders is one of the things that countries do during the war. For example, Ukraine did that in like first or second day. So actually, it maybe wasn't like direct points, because yes, ruble started to cost like, I guess it dropped more than 2 times, but then it gets back, maybe in 2 or 3 weeks.
You mentioned a sense of panic, and I think that fits really well with how I imagine I would feel if I were in your shoes inside Russia at the time. And I can't imagine how I would find enough peace of mind to focus on developing a plan that, didn't involve me just fleeing immediately. And I know that everybody responds differently to situations, but how did you do that? Where did you find that like peace of mind or that calm to develop and execute a plan?
That's really a very important thing that you mentioned, that everyone responds differently. I have no idea how many people in Russia actually acted like I did. Maybe it's 1 in 1,000, maybe it's 1 of 2 people. It's really hard to say. I would say that even between my friends, everyone reacted completely different. A lot of people just thought that nothing will change. Mm-hmm. If you return to me, then I guess I'm the one who like always prepare for the worst. Mm-hmm. So when something like this started, I decided to do something immediately. And plan of leaving the country was like, it wasn't really distinct, but it appeared. So I actually went to this government, we call it service of one window. So it's actually one big government house where you came and you can solve a lot of different problems that regular people have with any connections to government, like, I don't know, their pensions. For example, I went there to get my passport. You can go there to do something with your real estate or your car or whatever. So I guess in first 3 days, I almost stopped working. And it seems like all our company was paralyzed in this way during the first days. And everyone was trying to understand what is happening, what is the best thing to do. So what I did is actually made this passport and moved all my money I can to my sister.
Oh, right. In the States.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Are your parents still in Russia?
They live in Russia, but they planned a vacation in the US during this time. So they already had a US visa. They went to the United States, to my sister, to their grandchildren. And right now, my parents visiting me here in Mexico. So they basically live, this month, they live in like next apartment to mine.
Do you have any other siblings, brothers or sisters in Russia?
Right now, no. But my parents are planned to return to Russia.
So this may be a difficult question. I do have some friends that have left Russia in the past year, and some of them have left, very close family behind, including spouses and children. And when they have left, they've been unsure if they would ever return. And this could mean never seeing some family in person again. Are these conversations you've been having with family and friends?
I moved here not alone, but with my girlfriend, and her family stays in Russia. And being able to go to Russia and see them or help them if something happens is really one of the most important points for my girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
For example, there are different ways like to integrate, to get visas to different countries. And that's one of the reasons why we never really, why we decided not even to try to get any refugee visa in any country. Because if you do things like that, you are not able to leave the country for usually a pretty long time.
And the Russian government wouldn't be too happy with any Russian citizens seeking refugee status or asylum because of present conditions in Russia. You'd be burning a significant bridge in doing that.
The thing is that currently the Russian government isn't happy about anything. And even if you, like, almost every day, maybe every week now, there are some Russian officials who just try to create some laws to actually affect people who left Russia. Maybe to add some taxes for people who left Russia and work in Russian companies, or just like, let's call all of them traitors and everything like this. So actually the Russian government right now is very volatile. There are some super radical talks from really big officials, and they all actually can controverse each other, and you never know what is true and what will happen. And I believe they actually doesn't know this by themselves. That's why I guess Russian government and what they think of the situation isn't this much applied for us, just because it changes every day.
I noticed that you referred to the war, well, as a war, but that's not the case in Russia, correct? People are forbidden from calling it a war.
I guess it depends on the community. Inside of all my communities, it's like my school, because it was like a special school for physics and mathematics, and between my friends in university, and even inside the hobby, I guess most of the people call it war.
Openly?
I guess not. I think people mostly do not make any open posts about this.
Right.
Because like if you stay in Russia, then it's just a risk. And I don't actually believe that you can achieve much with this. Because, for example, we have this some kind of chat in Telegram where we actually talk about the politics. And it doesn't seem that talking about it actually changes someone's opinion. So we have people of different opinions who are like tolerate enough to talk to each other and try to explain their positions. And it exists for the same time as the war is going, and it doesn't seem like anyone changed an opinion in any way. So I actually believe that publicly talking about your opinion will not work. Maybe some people would understand that people of different opinion exist. So that might be important for someone, but I don't know. For me, it was super obvious that people of different opinions exist. I just know them. And when someone tells me the story from completely different side, not that I agree with, and maybe even super radical side, I just know, okay, I know that people exist. Yeah, maybe I can wonder that some concrete man has this opinion. It may surprise me, but it doesn't actually change mine. And my opinion doesn't actually change his. So
I've asked you how you felt at specific moments or in reaction to specific things, but I am interested in a more global sense of impact on you. Like in its totality, how are you feeling about everything that's happened and the way that it's impacted your life?
Yeah, actually, it's a super noticeable change in your life. So it has this super bright and awesome side, and it has this super terrible and negative side at the same time. Because when you actually decide to leave, then you understand that you actually have to choose from. Because when you're actually in Russia, then you don't have a democracy. You can't choose anything what will happen globally in the country you live in. So all you can do is, okay, you can find a different job. And the thing that you actually find very important when you live in this, when you actually started to choose which country I want to live in, become like, what was I doing all my life? I was choosing between something that actually completely equal, because the world is so much bigger and there are so many different opportunities and everything. And you feel that you was like closed in very, very narrow like spot. And for example, for me, I decided to do like my own project right now. So I spent time on this. And one of the reasons is because to doing your own project before you start monetizing it is allowed in any country. If you need to monetize something or work somewhere, you need some additional work permissions, visas, and everything. So I actually moved to the Acapulco, which is really nice city. I mean, I live in touristic area of the Acapulco because basically Acapulco is counts as really dangerous city to live, but in the touristic area it's pretty fine. In many ways, just my quality of life just increased in many ways. It decreased in a lot of other because of course you don't have so much entertainment, including opportunity to have like party with friends and something like this that you had in Moscow. But basically, I mean, quality of life and changed. I guess the weather maybe is the main factor, but having a swimming pool right near your apartment that you can swim in January and stuff like this, it's a really bright side, as well as doing what you want, doing your own projects, doing something that you really like to do. It's another part of this big bright side, which actually make me, I guess, gives me power to something, I don't know, will to live and to actually go through all the negative parts of things. And the negative part of things is in Russia, you understand that actually government doesn't care about you almost, and not caring about you is like the best that government can do. So actually, you get this opinion that, okay, if I move to another country and no one would care about me, it would be fine. But actually, it's not quite like this, because all of the countries have very, very strange bureaucracy about all the work permissions and all the other stuff. When you're not a citizen of a country, you actually enter some kind of prejunctions of not innocence, because you don't need to be just nice to the government and don't do bad stuff, break laws and everything. It's not enough. If you want to stay in some country when you are not a citizen, you actually need to prove that you are not a bad guy. So instead of just not being it, you need to make some proofs. And the problem is usually there are no fine ways to do it. Because when government makes their policies, they try to cover as much cases as they want to. But when you actually want to relocate, you understand that you have like maybe 8 options of different visas for some very crazy cases, but you don't just have a visa for you. So you actually need to understand, you either need to change something or you need to change the country, because in some countries there's no like good options to get visa for you. So for example, you cannot do your project and instead you need to find a company that will sponsor your visa and you will must to work in this company. And all these policies changes a lot because, for example, in Mexico, there was a visa just if you can prove that you have money to stay in Mexico, then you can go to Mexico. But actually they stopped actually giving those visas. And the stuff happens in like every country, because all my friends, okay, there's some cluster in Armenia, Turkey, and Georgia, but actually I have a lot of friends in different countries, and some kind of visa problems appears everywhere, just everywhere. And it's not like something that happens this year. It's something that happens all the time. So people were denied of their visas for some strange reasons. One of my friends actually like had all these applications for Canadian visa, and they were moving inside the company that they worked in. But in some last moment, Canada denied, and so they moved to the same company, but in Argentina. And this happens everywhere. In Thailand, in Sri Lanka, in Indonesia, in Turkey, in Mexico. I guess it can happen in Argentina too, but I don't know.
Mhm. So you're living with some uncertainty still now.
Yeah, because until you actually become like a citizen of some country, it's always additional uncertainty because of the government.
Mhm.
So it's very counterintuitive because in Russia, okay, there's government position. I don't like it. A lot of people support it. And actually, I know that, for example, that a lot of people in Russia, especially if I move somewhere outside Moscow, will actually hate me as much as my government does. But when you move to Mexico, it's completely different because people are friendly and you can go everywhere and everyone is happy to see you. But the government, you need really, really to put a big effort to actually legalize your staying.
Mhm.
And so it's a very big difference between all the governments and all the people everywhere in the world.
So let me ask this then. Even accounting for the uncertainty, what are your plans or what do you hope for?
It's pretty wide open.
Yeah.
So right now, I do some of my own project, mostly for making a portfolio to actually later find a job in some a little bit different fields that I worked in Russia.
Mhm.
So it still be IT, but a little bit different.
Are you hoping to stay in Mexico or are you open to other places?
United States is the country that I actually look the most, just because most of the companies that I actually can call like companies of my dream,
Mhm.
they're actually located in US. The problem of Mexico is actually that, yeah, I like Mexico, but I don't see really good job opportunities here.
Mhm.
So maybe if miracle happens and my own project can make me not only a portfolio but money, then maybe it would be an option to stay in Mexico for longer.
How long currently can you stay in Mexico?
For tourist visa, I can stay until, I guess, until May.
Okay. So, with your sister in the United States and your parents returning to Russia, and you in Mexico for now,
hmm
and the uncertainty of when, maybe even if, you can all see each other again in person, have you all talked about this?
Yes, but it seems, at least we hope that opportunity to like fly to US and Mexico would still be able for my parents.
Mm-hmm.
Even if Russia will close the borders, then my parents are old enough would be old enough to move anyway, because when the borders are closed, they never close it for people who cannot be mobilized just because of their age.
Right.
And it's kind of maybe this opportunity to like join together during this all the COVID stuff. And for example, as we did during this new year, when my parents were in the United States and my sister was there in the United States as well. And I joined them just using some video call. It's still, for me, it's a pretty real talking. It's real communication, and it's not that different than actually sitting around the same table. It's something different, but it's really close.
Mm-hmm.
And for parents, it's because they speak English a little, and they doesn't speak any other languages besides English and Russian. So for them, would be not that good to live outside Russia.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, it's like we have different opinions and positions about, for example, should I move or not?
Mm-hmm.
My parents may think differently, as well as, for example, we with my parents we have different political opinions about what is happening,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't talk much about it because just because we don't want to argue inside the family. And so I guess we just made all these decisions separately because I choose what is best for me. No, of course, with my girlfriend, we make these decisions together, and they make their decision to stay by themselves. So it's like this.
Do they support your decision to leave Russia?
It's pretty hard to say,
Yeah.
but I guess after the mobilization, mostly they does.
Yeah. Do you ever expect that you'll go back to Russia?
As I said, Russia is super volatile right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe you cannot plan to return because you don't know what will happen in Russia in next months. And you definitely don't know what will happen in Russia in next 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I can say that there is no way for me to return to Russia. That's not true. But I don't really believe that circumstances and changes in Russia will be good enough to move here.
How do you feel about that?
Maybe I'm not as an analyst, I'm not the person of feelings and more the person of thinking. So for me, it's just one big uncertainty that the only way to handle it right is not being there right now and wait until something changes. Maybe some changes will come faster than I anticipate. It would be great, but who knows?
Yeah. Okay, one final question. What's something interesting you've been reading, watching, listening to, or doing lately?
I guess it's Wednesday series.
Oh, yeah? Are you enjoying it?
Yeah, pretty much.
It's on my list, but I haven't watched it yet.
We just started with my girlfriend, and now she's in another city for visa issues. So maybe just the beginning, but I really like it. At least like the first half of season. I would really recommend you at least to begin.
Okay, well, I'll let you know if I do, and I'll hold you responsible if it's horrible.
Okay.
Thanks for taking the time to share your story with me. I really appreciate it, and I truly wish you and your family the best.
Thank you for this. Thank you for welcoming me. It was a great conversation.
Immigration itself is a polarizing issue, and one that is leveraged by politicians to advance nationalist, xenophobic arguments, reasons to build walls, to stigmatize victims, to put children in cages. And on some level, I get it. There are limited resources within borders, not just to make life comfortable, but at a more basic level to even make sure that citizens of a country, including my own, are housed, heated, and fed. And when people come in from the outside, it can seem like a threat. I get it. But to my mind, this is all the more reason that we need to be invested in promoting democracy, promoting freedom, and promoting peace beyond our borders. If you feel that our resources are limited and strained, the best use of your energy, of your anger maybe, is to ensure that people around the world are safe where they are, so that they never have to leave. Your hatred, your anger, your resentment, these things may sometimes come from a very valid place, but in end, they're just eating your soul, eroding your humanity. And in its own way, when you stop seeing people as humans, when you lose your compassion, your empathy, you are taking away your own freedom of peace, of calm, of stability. When you ask for recognition of the validity of your life, of your challenges, of your struggles, it should serve as a reminder that everyone else deserves the same recognition. It's tough, especially when things are not going well for you or for your family and friends. I've been there. But think about this. Would you ever care about someone when they need it if they didn't care about you when you needed it? We could all do more to care about our own. This is absolutely true. But don't give away your own humanity and peace of mind. Don't embrace unfreedom because you're angry. It will come back around, and it has fangs, and it is ruthless. And when it does come back around, you're going to want allies. All right, check back next Friday and every Friday for a new episode of Deep Dive. Chat soon, folks.